step in this process is to identify the broad spectrum values and benefits associated with kelp and eelgrass habitats, as well as the range of interests that you all have that will help us develop this framework. So based on findings from earlier regional plans and data available and scientific literature reviews, we've drafted an initial list of values, which is what we hope to build from today. So like we mentioned earlier, we are divided into these three categories: social, cultural, economic, and ecological, but we recognize that there's strong connections and overlap among many of these different values. And so our goal today is to worry less about which specific bucket these values should exist in, and instead spend time on identifying what additional values or benefits should be added to the list. So you are all in the breakout room for economic values. And what we mean by that is not necessarily what is the dollar amount pinned to kelp and eelgrass, but rather what are the services that kelp and eelgrass provide that we humans directly use that also contribute to our local economies. So an example could be these habitats provide for marine tourism, or the habitat kelp and eelgrass provide for commercial fisheries like Dungeness crab. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Annie to begin the discussion. Thanks.
Sounds great. Thank you. And just so you all know, in terms of what you're looking at, this is an online collaboration tool, in case you haven't used it before, called Mural. And basically what it does is it helps us emulate if we were having an in-person experience together of, putting Post-its on the wall, being able to categorize stuff, group things together, star things in case, people continue to say the same things and agree on things. So just wanted to mention that you don't need to learn how to use it. We're going to be running it for you. So all you have to do is either raise your hand, take yourself off mute, or put your comment in the chat. So I'm going to start walking us through question by question. So we have 3 questions. We'll spend about 5 minutes on each one. So if you don't mind, Chinka, just zooming in on that first question so people can see it really clear. So the first one we're going to talk about is looking at that list above in terms of the economic values that DNR has presented. Are there any values that you don't see on there? And we'll go ahead and open it up to folks in terms of why you came to this group. You want to talk about economic values, what things are important to you in addition to these. Okay, so I'm seeing some hands up. Great. So I'll just go in the order received. So Jill, you're up.
Sure. In the commercial fisheries, that gets to the economic value of provisioning, eating the fish that use the kelp and eelgrass for habitat. But part of provisioning is also eating kelp itself. I think that when you are talking about diversity, that there are certainly groups of folks who are kelp is a regular part of their diet. So I think that should be added. Another one is art. You have outdoor recreation or marine tourism. You need to actually include things like artists that photograph or paint or in some way use the kelp eelgrass ecosystem for inspiration.
Thank you. That's great. And Chinka, do you mind zooming even further? Sorry, I just think it might be helpful just for Jill and others to be able to kind of see what you're typing, and just Jill, just in case we didn't capture anything that you want to make sure we capture, please just let us know. And we might need to zoom in a little bit further. I know my eyes are, and I guess I can zoom in myself on my computer, but I don't know if everybody can do that or not. Okay, so we've got Amy up next.
Hi, thanks. I was gonna mention the food as well. And I wanted to specifically say, I seem to recall a year or so ago, Washington Sea Grant working on some workshops and presentations to sort of build an industry around kelp farming in the region. So not just, There's the idea of kind of traditional gathering of kelp and sort of small scale harvest of existing. But it seems like some folks are at least talking about larger scale opportunities to develop sort of an aquaculture type industry. And then I also just big thumbs up to the artist comment. And then also, I don't know if the climate change mitigation, you specifically include blue carbon in that, and sort of that idea as sort of, you know, not just sort of kelp or marine vegetation as a way to mitigate impacts of climate change, but actually absorbing carbon and reducing ultimate climate change potentially.
Great. Thank you. All right. And I don't know how to pronounce your name. Is it Frithiof?
Yeah, teal is fine.
Okay,
I
teal.
know if Amy and I think exactly like, so Amy's two comments about kelp is a commercial harvest and then a blue carbon market for eelgrass for my two thoughts there as well. So I don't know if that's that the little star goes there. That's how that works. But, nice job, Amy. You know, are thinking exactly the same thing.
Great. Yeah, I had just put a star over on the art part too. So, okay. Thanks, Shanka. Great. I'm not seeing other hands up, so I don't know. We could maybe address some of the questions in the chat if Max, if there's someone there that you think that you would be helpful to address.
Yeah, Annie. So one of the questions that was raised is around the topic of shoreline armoring. I don't know if Marie, you want to speak to that verbally, or if anybody else has thoughts or comments. The question was, is there any concern with shoreline development and or armoring and the effects on kelp?
Great. And then Jill, yeah?
So I'm a member of the Island County Marine Resources Committee, and we spend a lot of time talking about how shoreline armoring interferes with the natural processes for sediment deposition into the marine environment. The sediment is necessary for the eelgrass to root and grow. The lack of sedimentation interferes with eelgrass and kelp development, so armoring is not a good idea, and removal of armoring is one of the main ways that we bring back these natural processes.
Okay. Great, thanks. I just took that note right down there. Just trying to also help Chenka with some of the note taking. So I see another hand up from Valerie.
Hi, I just have a different question. So I work on natural resource damage assessment projects, right? And the value, of course, of eelgrass is 100% once it's fully functional and restored. But the problem is, of course, we all know that eelgrass and kelp restoration is not easy, not easy at all. And of course, where we get the most valuation in economic value is if it's fully functional. And that's where we get our money from the potentially responsible parties. So I just wonder, of course, a lot of us are these research scientists. What can we do better for eelgrass and kelp restoration?
Great, thank you for that, Valerie. Looks like Chenka's got your comment. Okay. I just transferred a couple over from the chat as well.
Anyone from the chat is about workforce development.
Yeah.
Which I think is also a great comment.
Yeah, I got that one up here. Would you want to speak more to that before I go to Ryan? Who gave that comment on workforce development? Let's see.
That was me, Melissa.
Yeah, Melissa, if you want to go.
We work a lot with local students, high school students, and career and technical education is such a huge component of our community colleges system. And all of these fisheries, industries, outdoor rec, etc. That's all potential place-based skill development for our students. And some of these jobs are incredibly well-paying. So that's a component of the economic picture that I don't want to see lost, is the people that do these jobs.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'm going to go up to Ryan next, and then Daryl, I have you on deck.
Hi. So I'll offer a perspective that might come at this question from a slightly different direction. When I think about the economic vitality of Washington and our inland marine waters, I can't separate that from the ports. I can't separate that from commercial and vital recreational uses of harbors and marinas. DNR, as the manager of aquatic lands, also issues leases for these economic and recreational and commercial uses. And I guess I want to highlight that you can't have all of these things and not sacrifice some of the eelgrass and kelp function. And dredging navigational waterways and enlarging large ports is going to come with losses. So from a different angle, you know, those are values and economic values we're trying to maintain with this planning, and yet they're involved in losses. And then lastly, those same parties have purse strings and have mitigation and compensation ability. And so I hope that ports and commercial and recreational bays and harbors and shoreline development is considered a value that we're trying to maintain here as well.
Okay, thanks for that. And then we'll go to Daryl, and then we'll move into the next question. I know we'll get all the things in the chat as well incorporated later too. So Daryl?
Yeah, thank you. We've been interested in growing kelp and eelgrass as a way of trying to consume the excess nutrients in some of our areas in central Puget Sound, to try to deal with some of the low oxygen levels we have. And in order to really do this long term, well, besides dealing with the overloading of nutrients, we also want to use it to try to consume carbon to try to reduce the acidification within Puget Sound. But to do this long term, we need a way of monetizing the value of the kelp and eelgrass. You know, the foods market is kind of flooded right now with the other folks that are growing kelp and eelgrasses that can be used for. But we've been looking at the possibility of using it as using the oils from these crops to produce plastics instead of using petroleum, and using what's left, or putting what's left in anaerobic digesters to capture the methane from decomposition. We you know, once we get past the growing season, we really don't want that decomposition to happen inside Puget Sound, where the methane's just going to release and go back into the water and the atmosphere. So we're really trying to figure out how we can prevent the releasing of the carbon after the kind of growing season for our underwater crops, and still be able to generate some kind of revenue to help pay for growing the kelp and eelgrass.
Okay, thanks, Daryl. And then Josh, did you have one for this first question, or is it related to the second question?
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe for Q1 if there's time, but I don't have to, I can hold off too.
Okay, if you don't mind, just so we can move into the second one, feel free to put it in the chat and I'll copy and paste it as well if you'd prefer.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So let's go ahead and move into question 2. So thank you so much for all those great suggestions. We're going to continue collecting these throughout the next hour. So let's move into what economic values are most important to you in your community and why. So out of these things that you just all listed and the things that are already provided to you in that list from DNR, what are most important to you? And most importantly, why? And Ryan and Josh, I see your hands up, but that's probably from before. So if anybody, okay, I'm just gonna say start of question 2 in the chat. And Valerie, your comment relates to the challenges. Okay, great. We can move things around too, kind of after we get things set. So maybe just focusing on the why. Why are those values important to you? It looks like, okay, yeah, Ryan.
I think it's hard to overstate the value of, say, blue carbon or carbon sequestration or climate resilience when talking about the value of these ecosystems. And that's not an ecological statement. That's a human value statement that we're going to need these plants in our waters, fixing carbon and building resilience for climate change. So it's both can be valued and can be marketed ultimately. And there are parties developing commercial scale proposals for carbon sequestration and ecological services delivered. So these are real values.
Mm-hmm.
That's my number one interest in this is whole ecosystem maintenance.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And I see Josh's hand up.
Sure, thanks. I'm just gonna wrap my comments that I didn't say before into this one, but I think it fits. And just echoing what Ryan said, but I think ecosystem-based management is sort of another term for that, and that I think that's incredibly important, especially with economic values, because you know, by managing the entire ecosystem, you're creating space for all the different, you know, recreational fishing and commercial opportunities without letting one or another you know, dominate, especially in a giant conurbation like Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and all the smaller cities around here. So I think that, yeah, ecosystem-based management.
Okay. Ecosystem-based management. Also, it sounds like it's kind of like a win-win opportunity to look at this. Yeah. Okay. Valerie?
Just adding on to the ecosystem-based management, it's for forage fish, and forage fish, or sand lance and Pacific herring love eelgrass especially, and when it comes to and that's where they lay their eggs. That is their livelihood. And of course, you know, we know that the salmon eat the forage fish. So if once we protect the forage fish, we have more salmon, and our salmon will survive. Yeah, better.
The circle of life there. Exactly. So great. Thanks for that addition, Valerie. And then Sophia.
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to express in terms of economic values, I'm particularly really interested in the recreation and the commercial recreation. I own and operate a sea kayaking company here in Bellingham, Washington. And so obviously we see a lot of eelgrass and kelp. And I think also like we bridge really the gap between the economic value and the ecological, because a lot of the times when we're working with people, we are kind of like the first line in educating a lot of the public, especially people who aren't familiar with Washington. We get a lot of like out of state people or out of the country people. And we talk about eelgrass and kelp on all of our trips. So yeah, I just want to express, I guess, my value in that sort of economic value. And I'd love to like continue finding ways that we can bridge those gaps and kind of help educate the public.
Thank you. Yeah, that education piece is key, I think, on a lot of these in terms of bridging those gaps and how do you make all of them work simultaneously together. So thank you for that. Teal?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this has already been done or if it relates to question 3 better, but have we put a value on eelgrass and kelp beds? Like, have we tried to estimate the value to Washington State from the ecological services provide that, and the tourism and a potential carbon, like has that valuation of the beds and kind of a both an ecosystem services or commercial value been done yet? Or is that one of the challenges that this plan will try and address?
It's a good question, Teal. I don't know if DNR has a response to that.
Yeah, I can jump in and say that I know that this is something that lots of different folks have done in different contexts. I wouldn't say that there's like an authoritative economic evaluation for eelgrass and kelp within Washington State. It's not something that we are planning to do for this process. I think that it would be a massive undertaking for us to do. But we've heard a lot of people talk about it, right, in the context of being able to demonstrate the value of kelp and eelgrass, especially to folks who are maybe less invested in the environmental aspects of kelp and eelgrass itself. But yeah, we're not planning to do that at this time, but hoping to capture some of the economic values in a less quantitative, more tangible sense.
Thanks, Max.
Okay, and I see Valerie's hand up again.
So I was just thinking, well, of course, yeah, it's difficult to really value to assign an economic actual dollar for these resources, unfortunately. But so when it comes to HIAs, it's just 100% for fully functional, and that's how it's valued. So unfortunately, we never get 100% towards full restoration of eelgrass, or kelp.
Thanks, Valerie. Okay. Anything else before we move to question number 3? Okay. Yeah, Ryan.
I'll give you one other suggestion, and this is because as a regulator, I work quite a bit with aquaculture. Aquaculture producers believe that their methods of cultivating are broadly consistent with healthy ecosystems. And it's a difficult question to crack, but no question, these systems support vital commercial fisheries and shellfish fisheries. And those values are really important. They can be focused in some counties where they are of high importance to the vitality of that county. So that's a real thing. And this ecologist is not afraid to admit it.
Okay. Okay. And then, okay, doesn't look like we have other items. So thanks for that last addition here, Ryan. And then in terms of moving down this way, question number 3 focuses on what challenges or concerns should be considered as it relates to economic values. What comes to mind? Bree?
Hi, yeah, one of the things that comes to mind is how we manage fish and game. So if we're going to implement taxation to help fund projects and protections, if there's not enough communication with the public, that may, cause some friction if that is needed.
Okay, thank you. And then Jennifer, I see your hand up.
Thanks. I have, the typical science challenge, which is we don't know enough. So I apologize ahead of time for that, but I'm just going to plow forward with that. And actually really honor what we heard from Daryl, which is that these are primary producers that can both take up nutrients and carbon and can also decompose. So in that spirit, I'll just say that I do think that one of the challenges is really being tackled by a lot of the groups that are working to get blue carbon criteria in place that will allow people to know how much carbon is actually stored by particular restoration or conservation efforts. And just to say that, yeah, I feel like there's still some work to be done in figuring out how much storage there would be, how much blue carbon benefit would come from these conservation and protection and restoration efforts, because they photosynthesize and they decompose.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna move things around a little to group them together. Sorry, Chinka. Just helps my brain. Okay, and then Amy.
Thanks. With respect to a concern I have related to valuing marine vegetation in a regulatory system, there's been some efforts in Puget Sound, this would be a Puget Sound only thing, to develop sort of a nearshore credit market for permitting purposes, right? And we know that restoration isn't always effective and we're not always getting those fully funded services. And so I think I have a concern putting too much of an economic lens on this important habitat that, someone can destroy eelgrass, but just buy some credits and we'll just restore it and it'll be really be equivalent.
Thank you. Okay. Looks like we've had a couple new people join us, so welcome if you have. We have a few more hands up. I did want to just note we're about, if you do want to rotate to another group, now would be a good time. There are 2 other breakout rooms open, focused on social cultural values and ecological values. So please feel free to do that. You're also welcome to stay in here to continue to talk about economic values. And if you need help moving to another breakout room, you can follow the instructions Lucila gave. They can be pretty straightforward or they can be confusing. So feel free to let me know if you need some help. Okay, Valerie, your hand.
So another challenge when it comes to restoration of eelgrass and kelp definitely is climate change. We have too many more heat events and it kills the restoration sites. So there is, if we could figure out how to cool our water, or to better help the eelgrass, or find something to cool the water, or find a device of some sort, that would be great.
Thank you. Okay, and then Wesley.
Yeah, I think I'm still trying to formulate this in my head, so I'm going to try and keep it brief, which may not be very helpful. But I think we have to be really careful about how and what sort of economic values we prioritize when we try to solve these different types of problems. I just feel like that in and of itself is really difficult, just from this economic, if we're just thinking about economic values. So, trying to figure out what we want to tackle first, I think it just requires a lot of insight and careful decision making. So,
yeah, good point. I think it will be a challenge to continue to balance. Okay, Teal.
Yeah, I guess Max started off telling us there were 10,000 acres for kelp and eelgrass that were, targeted to be protected.
You can continue if you want.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I think Wesley wasn't on mute.
Sorry, that was my bad.
Oh, no, no worries. Yeah, I think at the beginning, Max was telling us about 10,000 acres of eelgrass and kelp. And I was curious about like the geography and economy of where those will be. Like if it's cheaper and easier to distribute that protection in areas that are more intact and less impacted early on versus those areas that are more expensive to protect and higher impacted, but maybe have more ecological need for restoration in particular areas. So how that balance of economics, geography, and cost will play out when DNR is developing those 10,000 acres for each of the two, the seagrass and the kelp. So that sounds like a challenge. I can see it being easy to grab acres in Willapa Bay and Grays Harbor where costs are less and impacts are less, ignoring some of the challenges in Puget Sound. Not that you would do that, but I see that as tempting, I guess.
Difficult, a challenge nonetheless.
Difficult.
Yes.
Tempting.
Yes. Thank you, Teal. Okay, so, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say we have some comments in the chat too, if you wanted to look through those. So folks highlighting the importance of working waterfronts and resource-based livelihoods in many communities, and also emphasizing the importance of establishing a monetary value for kelp and eelgrass to bring in the general public. And then also echoing some of what sounds like Wesley was saying, that some of these can be very hard to prioritize because the benefits are highly variable based on species or even within species and over space and time.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, thank you for bringing in some of those chat comments, very important. And as I mentioned to folks, Max is monitoring the chat and we'll speak to those during our share out, and we'll make sure that those get transferred over to the board likely after the meeting. Okay, keep going here. So I know some people are new in this group, so welcome. And I see a hand raised. Happy to jump around the board in terms of question 1, 2, or 3. So Peter, if you can go first, and if you can just let us know which question you're focusing on with your comment, that'd be great.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm Peter Steelquist. I'm the Washington Policy Manager for the Surfrider Foundation. I was just in the other chat room for a little bit, but been listening into this for a few minutes. I just wanted to highlight something that was brought up earlier about selecting some of the areas that will be eligible for restoration and kind of the economic feasibility of that. And just wanted to bring up some of the trying to prioritize places with public access and easy recreation use. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thanks for that, Peter. Okay, others have comments overall. Happy to kind of go through our cycle of 1, 2, 3 again, if that's helpful, and we can try to summarize what we've been hearing so far. Okay, Sarah, which question are you thinking about commenting on?
I don't know whether it's the top one or what, but because I was obviously in other rooms, but as far as like economics, are there, yeah. So I would say, like, for example, indigenous populations, and not even just indigenous, there are other culture groups that also associate with economic values, whether it's like, say, Asian cultures or South Pacific Islander cultures. So there are other cultures that do live here in the Pacific Northwest that also place obviously not just cultural, environmental, but also economic value on the kelp and the eelgrasses as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And do you have the kind of like the details in terms of what you mean by that? What Indigenous populations might see in terms of the economic value?
I know, let me think, Bridget Ray was over in the social cultural, and she is Indigenous. I would actually punt that over to the Indigenous cultures to explain more. I do know that it is obviously something that is very important. I volunteer at the aquarium, and obviously we have a lot on the walls and in a lot of other places regarding obviously the ties between the Indigenous cultures. And actually another gal who is Japanese also mentioned her ties to it in the cultural group as well. So
great.
There is obviously a huge link there. So
Great. Well, maybe we'll try to just figure out how to tie those two together once we hear from the social cultural group. Thank you. Okay, I see Sarah's hand up. And Sarah, if you don't mind letting us know which question you're speaking to.
Oh, that's me. I'm trying to unraise my hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sarah. Sorry, I can't see people's faces when right now when you're not on camera, which is totally fine. It's late. You don't need to be on camera, but I'm sorry. Sometimes I trip over myself. Okay, so Jill.
Hi, I just jumped over to another group and then I had another thought back here on economic values.
The ones that are missing?
Yes. So what about resilience? The whole idea that we can slow down storm surges and adapt to sea level rise through better kelp and eelgrass, just through submerged aquatic vegetation in general, slow down wave action so that you don't have as much damage when there is a storm surge. So, right. The resilience issue is one which we should highlight.
Okay. I'm just going to give resilience its own sticky and then put it above this one. Okay. Great. Thank you. All right. And then Noah, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, my name is Noah Dennison. I'm an undergraduate student in Columbus, Ohio, actually, who is planning on coming out and doing a little bit of anthropological research on the seaweed industry and the burgeoning aquaculture industry out there this summer. And part of the research that I'm looking into is any existing sort of non-traditional economic values like gift economies and things like that, which sort of tangentially relates to the indigenous populations and other cultural groups and those associated economic values. I know that the value of kelp and eelgrass is hard to quantify, as we've mentioned, but even harder to quantify, I think, are the economies that exist outside of our traditional economy. But I think that they are just as important.
Great, thank you for that. And when you say gift economy, do you want to maybe explain what that means for folks that may not understand that term?
Yeah, so just the exchange that occurs between cultural bonds that doesn't necessarily come with, or doesn't come with a price tag, things that are exchanged that aren't necessarily paid for, at least in the ways that we think of them usually.
In a more capitalist society.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll connect some of these over here. Great, and then I see Cindy's hand up.
Hi, and I just came in, so I can't see what economic values were on the original definitions.
Oh, sure. We can scroll up for a moment for you.
Okay, that'd be good. All right, tropical fisheries. Okay, I would say just food web altogether, and I think that needs to be it needs to be informative of our infrastructure decisions and how things like roads granting are done. because for us out in the San Juans, we've correlated our information about eelgrass beds and spawning beaches and all those things with where our roads run, and we're seeing significant coastal erosion on the roads too. So question is, do you armor the beaches and continue to kill the kelp beds and the eelgrass beds and allow lots of piers and docks? What is that costing you in terms of the food web in the long run?
Gotcha. Okay. So I think that could also be one of the challenges, right? That we would want to note below. Okay.
Right.
Okay. I don't know, Chinka, if you're able to add that. And was that Cindy's voice? Did you have something else, Cindy?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I also wanted to say one of the other challenges to look for is mooring buoys are licensed out here. Just sort of, you apply for one and there's various agencies that grant the license. And the idea of mooring buoys was to protect the eelgrass beds, but you're getting to the point where they might actually be affecting the kelp and the eelgrass, and they are definitely affecting the tribe's ability to get to the fish. So that's an economic impact that should be looked at around those beds.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so anything else from new folks that have joined kind of halfway through this? We're happy to jump around between the three questions. The three questions are focused on are there any economic values missing in addition to the ones that DNR listed up top, which we can review if you'd like. What economic values are most important to you and your community, and why? And then what challenges or concerns should be considered as it relates to economic values, which is where we're zoomed in on. And I see two hands raised. Cindy, is that a residual hand from before, or do you have something new to contribute?
Sorry, that's a
from
residual
before?
hand.
Okay.
Let me find it. Yeah.
No worries. All right,
Yeah.
so no worries. I'll go to Jennifer next.
This is possibly not economic, but I do feel like both of these species they're really excellent sentinel species. So to the extent that there is, economic value in having clean water and sort of functioning shorelines for all the reasons. So it may not necessarily be the case that the eelgrass and the kelp are always providing the economic values in and of themselves, but they can be really good indicators or sentinels of degradation. So economically important because if they are disappearing, then there's a whole bunch of other problems that they're indicating.
Okay. Thank you. And yeah, the mural link is actually just for the facilitators. We thought it might be a little difficult to train everyone on how to use the mural. So feel free, for those that are new in here, and I think there is a platform called Miro, so don't worry, there's both. But for those that are new in here, feel free, you can either take yourself off mute, let me know you want to get in the queue, raise your hand. Tom, I'll go to you soon in just a moment, or put it in the chat. Just note that the chat, we're not automatically putting it over in the moment just because it's a lot of copying and pasting while we're also trying to listen, but it will make its way over to the mural board as part of a product of tonight's meeting just after we finish. So Tom, I'll go to you next.
I just jumped on here. I kind of scanned through real quick. Like, there are two examples that I'm aware of where you don't have kelp or don't have eelgrass, what the economic impacts were. And have you talked about that?
Two examples where we don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, say that again.
On the East Coast, they lost all the eelgrass in the 1930s. They had a wasting disease. And you can go back in literature, and the economic impacts of that were enormous, totally unsuspected. And you can go back and put dollars and cents on that really quick. The other smaller example of that is in Northern California just recently in 2013, when they lost the bull kelp, what that meant to fisheries in that and the economic impacts of that. Cynthia Catton was involved in that.
Okay.
You can go back and look. So there's some good links there if you need them.
Some good reference points in terms of
Yeah,
when it has occurred, how does it affect the economy?
Yeah,
Okay.
it was real.
Okay, let me just group those together and put a reference points for when kelp and eelgrass impacted the economies. Okay, thank you. Wow. I'll put that with those two. Okay, thanks for bearing with me while we do this. I'll move this over here. And thank you so much, Chenko, for being great at this. I know it's no easy task. Okay, I see Emily's hand up.
Yeah, I just had, thank you. I just had a kind of clarifying question. When we're talking about economic values, are people generally conceptualizing this just as like kind of monetary, or? Yeah, I just have that question.
You know, I don't think we've really said you have to look at it this way. But I'd love, Max, if you have a response in terms of how DNR perceives it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So Emily, thanks for the question. The way that we've been thinking about it is anything that any of the services Kelp and Eelgrass provide that we as humans directly use or contribute to our local economies. So not specific to tied to say like a specific monetary value, but anything that contributes to human use. So for example, marine tourism or the habitat kelp and eelgrass provide for commercial fisheries like Dungeness crab. So broadly interpreted.
Thank you.
All right, so for folks that are new, welcome to the space. We're talking about economic values, which you can see up top, including tribal fisheries, aquaculture, commercial fisheries habitat, outdoor recreational fisheries, marine tourism, commercial recreation, climate change mitigation, and so many others now that we've got listed on this great mural, as you can see. And there's also lots of chat that contributes to these 3 different questions as well. So of the 3 questions, are there any economic values that you see missing that aren't here, or maybe that you'd want a second or third, because we should be putting stars on some of these that are really important to you? What economic values are most important to you and your community, and most importantly, why? And then what challenges or concerns should be considered as it relates to economic values? So we've got several things listed. I think we're probably heaviest in question 1, lightest in question 2, and question 3 is kind of probably the middle. So would love to hear if folks have any input on 1 or all 3 of these questions. Can give you a moment to look at what's already been typed in up on question number 1. So I'll just read off some of the starred ones, which just means more than one person have been saying those things. So there's been a focus somewhat on workforce development, the food web in terms of kelp as food. A couple people said kelp and eelgrass as art in terms of artists, photographers, painting, etc. A big focus on blue carbon as part of climate mitigation. And then, of course, we can't forget recreation. So sea kayaking, surfing, paddleboarding, diving, snorkeling. And then I think I might have only heard one person on this sentinel species, but maybe I just missed somebody else, Chenka. So thank you for putting that on there. And then I won't read every other one that we focused on, but those were kind of the high level ones. Food security. Okay, yeah, we could add that to the food web option too. So food security. Yeah, that's good to include that there. I think our workforce development post-it might have been disappeared somehow. So we'll create a new one for that. Oh, no, it just got moved. There it is. Okay, we'll just move this over here. Okay. And it's hard to keep up with the chat, so please feel free if you want to see something right away. Okay, Tom's equity, let me just scroll through some of these. And feel free to take yourself off mute. Sometimes it can be hard to keep up with all the chat.
Yeah, this is Cindy again, San Juan County Council. I would say that outdoor recreation and the marine tourism and commercial recreation are probably, in terms of money, are the two most important economic values, because we're really grappling with them. The balance of that in relationship to food web and climate change and habitat degradation are it's a very tough problem, because we have grown our economy around tourism.
Okay. So I think that's also a challenge down below, right? So we've grown.
Right.
So growing the
It's
economy.
important, right? It's important, but it's also a challenge. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see Cindy's hand up, or was that Cindy? Okay. Okay, and then we've got about 5 minutes left. So what we'll do is we're going to do a share out. I'm happy to take the lead on that. I'll mainly just kind of read off some of the words in terms of like where we starred things are and some of the post-its, but please know that the share out is not in any way a reflection of this entire conversation. There's a lot of information shared, and we'll make sure to synthesize it. We have a recording of tonight's breakout room, and we'll make sure to save all the chat, so we have that ready to go. But is there anything else in this last 5 minutes that you really want to star or make sure we have documented? Lindsay.
Hi, no affiliation. I am just a concerned citizen. I just wanted to star recreational commercial rec in question 2.
Sure.
Bridge the gap between ecological and economic value, first line in educating the public, especially out of state and out of country folks. I definitely want to star that because that does resonate with me coming from out of state. And going out to the recreation sites has really helped me to learn about our natural environment.
Thank you. Great. Okay, Tom.
Click, click, click again.
Tom, that's like...
Yeah, I got it. Look, just to tie this together, it was a really interesting discussion over in the social, cultural portion of this discussion that some of you may have been in on. And that had to do with the importance of these resources helping people connect to their sense of place, which in turn makes them care about things, which then in turn will help support these kind of economic things. How these are all connected. There's strong ties in this. Don't silo these 3 issues that we're talking about tonight.
Yeah, I think that we could highlight that in one of the challenges or concerns, like not siloing these these value sets. Consider them interconnected.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Sounds like that was a good conversation. Other folks? Okay, I think we're gonna be forced to go back to the plenary group in a moment. Max, I can kind of lead this share out. I think we're just keeping it really short, but I'll just kind of highlight some of the key post-its. And then if you want to add anything from the chat, since you were monitoring there, we can do that. And of course, if we miss any big things, please feel free. But again, we're going to make sure that this all gets cleaned up and you have a really nice looking deliverable after this to refer to that hopefully incorporates everybody's comments and everything in the chat, verbally shared, etc. Okay. Max, I'm not sure if we're supposed to all go back together or if we're supposed to just stay here till they force us back, but I saw a 5-minute warning several minutes past the 5 minutes ago. So I don't want to miss our call back. But if anybody has anything else you'd like to add, I don't want to miss that too. So please feel free to take yourself off mute if you do. Okay. Yeah, great. And so we'll add a star to what Tom just said too. Thank you.
Looks like we have about 15 seconds left, Annie.
Oh, okay. Great. I'm glad you're seeing that. I just have way too many things up, I guess. Great. Well, thank you all so much for your time this evening. We'll move back into the main space. And if you have any